So to understand not better, we will do a small exercise. So in this exercise, we will see how to add items to a list. Uh, should we allow adding duplicate items to a list or not allow adding duplicate items to a list? So we'll see both the cases where we can add duplicate items. Well, that's easy. You already know that. And then we'll also see how to add items only if they do not exist in the list. So we'll start with importing, import a module called random. So import is a keyword that is used to import, okay, or bring into your program some other program. All right, so this random is basically also a program, right? So what you're doing is somebody created this random program. So you want to bring in the code inside this random program. All right. Now, what does random do? What can it do? So it can do a few things, but basically they all revolve around creating random numbers. Okay. So you're all familiar with the idea of random numbers, right? For instance, when you play something like lottery, or when you play many games, really, any dice game, for example, right? When you roll a dice, essentially, the outcome of a roll of a dice is random, okay? It's not predetermined, right? So it's a random outcome. So this module is really important in helping you generate random numbers. What we'll do here is we'll create a list of random strings. Now let's look at this statement. There are actually two new things here in this statement itself. So you know about the for, there's this new in thing, and there's this range built-in function as well. So in is a keyword, a new keyword that we are discussing now. And the range is a built-in function. You know, it's a function because it has these parentheses, and 10 is a function argument or a function parameter. Okay, you've been using built-in functions previously also, like print. So x is the function's argument or function's parameter. Okay, just like that, we have this range function also. Now, what does the range function do? So it's going to return me a list of 10 numbers starting from 0 and ending at 9. So if I just show you this part here, I'm not using it inside the loop. I'm not assigning this to any variable. I'm just using this just like this. If I run this, I get something called range 0 to 10. Okay. Now this is not exactly a list, like I said, but it's very easy to convert it to a list. Okay, if you wrap this around the list built-in function, list is also a built-in function, and then if you run it, you get a proper list starting from 0 and ending at 9. So that is what list range does. It returns a list-like object, which is basically an iterable, okay, so that we can have a loop, because a loop requires an iterable going one item at a time. All right, so the value of I will be 0 in the first case. The value of I in the next iteration will be 1. In the next, it will be 2, and so on. So we want to create random strings. Okay, so we want to first make a system where we know what is going to be the length of the string. Okay, it can be a variable length anywhere between, let's say, 5 to 20 characters. Okay, So for that, what I'll do is create a variable called string length and assign it a random value. So for using a random value, I call this random module like this. Rand int is going to return us a random integer, okay? Between this range, and the range you specify inside the parentheses, like so. We want a random integer from 5 to 20. And then I'm going to initialize our random string with an empty string. So this is an empty string. If I don't put anything inside the quotes, it becomes an empty string, okay? Because I'm going to generate the string one character at a time, so I need to start with an empty string, okay? It's going to contain certain number of characters, which is going to depend on the string length, and that's going to come from this rand int function, which is not a built-in function because we are importing this random module, okay? These are built-in functions because we don't have to import anything for these to work. I haven't told you about this in. This in is a keyword which basically looks inside an iterable. What this is basically saying is you have this range 10, which is basically this, and so I will get a value from inside this list. All right, in is like looking inside this list. So in each iteration of the loop, it's saying for I in range 10, meaning in the first iteration, look inside the list, see what's the first value and assign that to I, which is 0. Okay. In the next iteration of the loop, look inside the list again, see what's the next value. So that would be 1. So assign that to I. So we're going to go one character at a time. So I'm going to use another loop inside. So this is going to be a nested loop. So for J in range string length. So this is saying create this loop that will iterate so many times. Okay. So if the value of string length is 5, this loop will iterate 5 times. If it's 20, it's going to iterate 20 times. All right. Because we need 20 characters or 5 characters, whatever that number is in str length. And now creating that string is easy because we have access to this loop. So one character at a time, we can concatenate to our random string, okay? So random string plus equal to, which is the same as writing random string equal to random string plus, okay? So this here, just this portion is equivalent to writing random string equal to random string plus, okay? So I've kind of used shorthand here. And plus what? So we are going to use another built-in function now called chr. And we are going to use the same random.randint function that we have seen here. This time we need a number between 65 and 90. And why is that? So this range is ASCII codes for the letters A through Z. If you look at ASCII codes, if you go to 65, that's the ASCII code for capital A, okay? And if you go to 90, that's the ASCII code for capital Z, right? So we want a number between 65 and 90, and both are inclusive, just like here. So that will give a random number between 65 and 90, and CHR is actually going to convert that number into a letter. We want a list of random strings, right? So we should have started with an empty list. So I'll create a random strings empty list, and this is a random string. So we need to append this random string into random strings. So once we generate a random string, we append that into our list of random strings, so that in the end of this loop that will run 10 times, we'll have 10 random strings. And then we can print our list of random strings. Let's run this. And there we go. We have a list of 10 strings which consist of random letters. Now, coming back to our exercise of adding duplicate items versus only if they don't exist, which is basically to understand the not Boolean operator. So of course, if I take any string from here, like this one, let's say, and I say random strings dot append, and the same string. Of course, right now, none of these strings are duplicates, as you can see. You can verify also. So it's very unlikely that any of these will be duplicates. There is a possibility, very, very small probability, that using this code will generate a duplicate string. Okay, there is a possibility, but the probability is very low. Of course, you can see visually that none of them are duplicates. Okay, but I can create a duplicate by doing something like this, right? So if I run this and then print random strings, now I get this string here twice. So this is here and here. Okay, so this is how you can create a duplicate entry in a list, of course. Now let's see how we can control that behavior to add an item only if it does not exist. I'll assign the string to a variable called string to add, and this time I want to add this only if it doesn't appear in the list. So let's take another string, for instance. Doesn't matter, we can take any one. So this is how you control adding an item to the list only if it does not exist. Okay, very simple. So you check whether that string is in that list or not. Only if it is not in the list do you actually add it. Okay, so if you read this like a proper English sentence, it makes sense. If string to add not in random strings, then add it. Okay, else you don't add it. So if I run this code, you'll see that it is exactly as it was here. This string did not get added because it was already present in the list. That's why it did not add it again to create a duplicate, because we are checking it here, and in doing that, it saw that this string is already present here, and that's why it did not execute this statement, because we are saying not in random strings.